All right, so we are attached to both Facebook and YouTube now. Evening, everybody, or morning or afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome, Charlesley, Jayanta, Gita, Daus. Zaw. Hello, Karen. Welcome. Hello, Shadow. Rahu, Chittapala, welcome. Hello, PGS. Hello, Christine, Anthony. We're just giving some time for people to roll in. Already have some questions. Hello, Charlesley. Welcome. All right. I think we have waited enough time. We have a group here. Let's get started. First question, what is the difference between thinking and being lost in thought? Could be no difference, could be a lot of difference. Being lost in thought insinuates that there's no really awareness. There's no mindfulness. You just kind of drifted off like a daydream. Whereas thinking is, has the insinuation of being a aware, an aware, very, how shall I say, like you're a very active thing where you are, you have like an object and you're thinking about it. It's like, okay, well, what do I do about this? What do I do about that? These are all mental processes. Some thoughts arise seemingly out of nowhere. Some arise of your own volition. And the main difference I would say there is whether you are aware and active or unaware and drifting. Gita has a question. Bhante, what is the minimum meditative level one would need to break through the path and fruit in your understanding of the teachings? I don't exactly know what you mean by path and fruit, because all four of the Arya levels have path and fruit. I'm assuming maybe you mean Sotipanna. And as far as I can tell from the suttas, there's no necessary minimum meditative level to become a Sotapanna. As a matter of fact, in the suttas, you have lay people who become Sotapannas on faith, right? Faith followers. So, I've heard some people say something to the effect of, you need to be in jhanas before you become a stream mentor, or you become a stream mentor and then you can get into jhanas. I don't know exactly where that's from. It's not something I'm very familiar with. But as far as I can tell, these are not intrinsically linked, that you must have one or you must reach a certain level before you have become a Sotapanna. And that makes sense, because you have various suttas where the Buddha talks about people have different tendencies. People's meditative practices are different, right? Some people, the Buddha in a sutta says, some people are more inclined towards samatha practices, the mindfulness of breathing, developing samadhi. Some people are more inclined towards like satipatthana, like practices that are develop the mindset of vipassana. But in the end, they kind of merge, because you need both samatha and vipassana. Right? The Buddha calls them swift pairs of messengers. So, and different people have different proclivities in that way, and they can both be Sotapanna, but they just have different paths. PGS has a question. Dear Bhante, certain traumas seem to be imprinted in the body. Would you please share some words on how to skillfully practice with them? So when it comes to traumatic experiences, what I would say is, I can give certain tips based on the assumption that you are or have sought some kind of therapeutic intervention, right? Something like traumas, it's a very kind of common thing. People will start meditating. And when you start to meditate, and you're sitting and your mind gets calm, many, many people who have gone through traumatic experience, even from childhood, all of a sudden, those just come right up, right? Because the mind is becoming calm and quiet. The default mode network kicks in, and all kinds of traumatic visions and experiences arise. And this is, something that it's very important to kind of understand, that meditation is not medicine in that way, right? It's very important to, you can have some kind of like a dual or a joint intervention, where you have therapeutic interventions and meditative interventions, right? You're meditating and you're working with a therapist, or doing what you need to do to work on the trauma. And so, that out of the way, what I would say is that if you have trauma, you should expect that you're going to encounter it when you meditate. You should just go into your meditation. I usually say don't have expectations of your meditation. But this might be one example where I say it might be something to expect. It might not happen, which is fine. But if it does, then I think it not catching you by surprise could allow you to be able to patiently endure it, right? And kind of not run away from it. Because that's important, right? There's even, like, if you go to a therapist, they have cognitive behavioral therapy. And part of cognitive behavioral therapy is, facing your trauma, facing what makes you fearful slowly in a controlled way. And you can do that as part of your meditation too. You start to follow your breath, and then visions start to come up. Sounds start to come up, smells start to come up, all connected from memory. And you can do your best to try to observe that, watch it. And observe how you react to it. Observe, and then give yourself lots of metta, right? Lots of compassion, understanding. Because this is a hard situation, and the body is, these things come up because the mind is saying, well, we need to work on this. We need to fix this. Let's do something about this. If it's something like from childhood, often you're in a hard situation and you just repress it because that's a survival mechanism. And then when you're older, it all comes out because you're not in a survival situation anymore. And so that's what I would say, is that try to, in terms of your meditation, expect that you will have experiences related to your trauma arise. Try to learn from them as much as you can. Try to observe them to see what is arising. And, it might be a repetitive vision, or it could be, some one time you sit down and something new comes up that you repressed, that you don't remember. And then that's something new to investigate. This is something that is, if this is something that is going to be very prominent in your practice, so much so that, you have a hard time following the breath and doing things like that, then it's okay. That's your practice. Just like somebody who has like a chronic pain, a chronic back issue, chronic this issue, chronic that issue, that becomes part of your practice. And so if you can do your best to endure them, know them as deeply as you can, investigate them, understand them, and you can then understand yourself. You can understand more of what happened and more of how you've handled it or not handled it, more how you've repressed it, and more how you can move forward. I wonder how Bhante Siddhasa would have handled this question. I don't even know if he knows what it is. Shadow, you have interesting responses and questions, that's for sure. How can I become a Super Saiyan in confidence through Buddhist practice? So Super Saiyan is an anime reference. And I don't know what an Arahant would be. Maybe an Arahant would be over 30,000. But what happens is when you follow the Noble Eightfold Path, you're gradually cleansing your mind. You are gradually developing your mind. And as you do that, slowly, but surely, your wisdom increases. Your insight increases. Your suffering lessens. Right? And you're raising your levels as you're going on over the years. You're getting more levels and levels and levels. I joke that because I was a big gamer, and I loved role-playing games, and like in the old games, you reach level 10 and then you get like a class. And so I joke that I reached level 10 and then my class became monk. Right? That's how it goes. You keep practicing and your power level increases. Now, of course, not your power level to, fly through the air, and well, maybe if you have psychic powers, not your power level to fight and, do all these kind of things, but your power level of wisdom to live skillfully, to be of benefit to yourself and others. That's the best power level, the power level of wisdom. Julie has a question. What are Brahmins? Can you please describe? So this goes to the culture of the Buddha at the time in ancient India, at least in the north. You have 4 castes. The caste system has 4 levels. You have the workers, the lowest level. Then you have the merchants. And I always forget the Pali words for those. But then you have the Katyas. That's the caste of warriors and leaders. That's the caste that the Buddha was born into. And then you have the Brahmins. The Brahmins are the highest caste. They are the priests, the shamans of Brahma. Right? So they are the highest caste. They perform the rituals that keep the society going. Right? They're keepers of the sacred flame. They learn the Vedas, right? All by oral tradition. They keep the Vedas going over thousands of years. Like, these are the Brahmins, this highest caste. And so when you read the suttas, you'll see the Buddha talk to Brahmins very, very often. Brahmins will come and question him. And a lot of times they'll become Buddhist monastics, or they'll become lay disciples of the Buddha. And sometimes they won't. But you'll see that this is the highest caste in the society of the Buddha. And the Buddha takes that word Brahmin, and the Buddha says in many places that how you are born does not determine your worth. It's like your actions determine your worth. So what he'll say is, one does not become a Brahmin by birth. Right? Which is, if you, in the society, yes, that's exactly how you become a Brahmin. Right? You're born in the Brahmin caste. But the Buddha is taking the word, the highest, right? The highest rank, and he is attributing to that to the awakened being, to the Arahant. Right? The Arahant, you become a Brahmin through effort, through action, through following the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's why we have the Brahmanical tradition. And the Brahmanical tradition is, as far as I can tell, because I'm no Hindu scholar, but as far as I can tell, the Brahmanical tradition of the time of the Buddha holds a very strong place in modern Hinduism, right? Because Hinduism is like an umbrella term for many different practices in India, which is ridiculously diverse. It's probably the most diverse country in the world in terms of the numbers of languages, numbers of religions, numbers of practices, right? And they're kind of all grouped into this one umbrella term called Hinduism, like in Buddhism, how all these various practices are grouped into Mahayana, which is an umbrella term. And so the Brahmins are the highest caste, and you read the suttas and you'll see them. The Buddha talks to them quite often. All right, Amaranta. Bante, I decided singlehood since 8 years ago. I feel better and have more peace and tranquility. But you suggested it's not recommended. Why? I don't know what you mean by singlehood. I mean, do you mean like not having a romantic partner? I'll hold that off for now, just so that I can have clarification. Okay, yeah, so yes. I suggest it's not recommended. I don't know if I've suggested it's not recommended. I mean, this is it's to be expected, I guess, in lay life that, that people will, it's just typical human behavior throughout existence, like, having families and things like that. But not everybody, it's not for everybody. It's probably for most people, but, some people, it's okay. If that's the life that is beneficial for you, and you have meaning and purpose, and you're enjoying life, what's wrong with it? Hey, that's what monks do, right? Charles Lee says, I have begun to sit crisscross applesauce for meditation. How do you work with knee or hip pain during meditation? So the knees and the hips for your posture are probably the two most important aspects of your lower body. So you want to think of your posture like a house or like a pyramid, right? The pelvis and the hips down act like the foundation. And if you don't have a stable foundation, then the rest up top is going to be shaky. It's going to be movie. So this is a very, very important aspect. One of the main reasons why people have issues with their knees when they sit crisscross applesauce is because the knees are high up. You can't really see it. Well, I'll just do this. The knees are high up, right? You're usually like this. Hard to see, but the knees are hanging, right? And what that does is that, especially if you're sitting for long periods of time, that really overly stretches all of the tendons, the hip open. Like, this is why in yoga you do hip opener exercises and things like that, and it really stretches that all out. And you can overdo it. You can, hurt yourself, at least temporarily. I've done it myself. And so the ideal thing to do is to have your knees on the ground. And you ask, well, how the heck do I do that? It's the hard thing. So, postures like, this is why I'm talking about, it's the ideal. Especially most Westerners can't do this. But the ideal is to have the knees on the ground. And that's what, when you see people who do like a lotus, the feet are up, and that puts, like, here's the knees, right? The elbows are the knees here. The feet are up, the knees go to the ground. And what that creates is a tripod. It creates a firm foundation. Knees and buttocks, right? On the ground. And that also puts a lot less strain on the knees. So what people will do often is they will put some cushions under their knees just so it supports it. All right, so that might be a good thing for you to do. Put some cushions under the knees. You can also try to sit in, what I do is I sit in what they call it's a modified Burmese posture. And so what you do is you have one foot or one leg like this, and then another leg next to it. So not one on top of the other, but one in front of the other. And what that tends to do is put your knees down low. And so that becomes a bit more of a stable posture without having to do something like a lotus, which most people can't do. I can't do it. I mean, I've been able to do it maybe like for 30, 40 seconds in the past before having to stop. But most of us can't do it. So even still, I can feel when I'm in that position, my knees are a bit high. My knees are not fully on the ground. And that's because of a variety of factors, mostly to do with my own, needing to do a lot more yoga probably. But then what I have when I'm like this, I actually have, as part of my regular setup, I have a little wedge. And I put that wedge right under the knee of the leg that's in front, because that supports the knee. When I don't have that wedge, especially if I'm meditating for many, many hours, it starts to pull and I start to have pains. And so you have to, the knees really kind of need to be supported one way or the other. That's the important thing about the knees. And that's why, people end up having knee problems with their meditation posture, because the knees are kind of all out and hanging and all such things. That also is part of the hip pain too. It's all like that stretching between the hips and the knees and the posture. If you do that, make sure that your buttocks is evenly distributed on the cushion, right? Because that's important. And then ideally what you want is your buttocks to be higher than your knees. And so when you're able to do that, your knees naturally just go down more. That's ideally the best thing, is to have the knees lower than the buttocks. And so what I do is I have like a little folded blanket that I prop under the cushion, right? So the cushion, instead of this, it's like this, right? And that kind of pushes my pelvis to a position that is much more stable and upright, and allows me to have a better posture. And I can actually sit for a half hour at least without any kinds of problems, which is not natural for me. Sitting meditation and myself have a long history of suffering and pain. So this is what I guess a few things that I can say. The knees, the hips, those are very important parts. Practice different postures, try different things. Check how different it feels when the knees are supported, and try to really pay attention to observing how the posture works. Like when I do a guided meditation, what I teach is scanning from the feet all the way up to the head. And while you're doing that, you're paying attention to the specific sensations that you're observing as you're going through the parts of the body. And you can see when there's, maybe not when you first start, but as you do it, as you refine your ability to see more subtle aspects of the body, you'll see, okay, this is an imbalance. Like I can feel right now that actually my sits bones, the two bones like that are where the buttocks are, the sits bones, if you know yoga, you know the sits bones. I can feel that actually one is higher than the other. So if I was meditating, I would fix that. I'm just sitting here talking to you guys, so I'm not too worried about it. It's not going to be for hours on end. But if I'm meditating, because I want to have my posture be as stable and comfortable as possible, I would feel that and I would say, okay, let me adjust that. And I'd go, right? So posture is extremely important, extremely important. I went through, having, one cushion, two cushion, three cushions, side cushions. You go to like a meditation retreat and you'll see some people have like a fortress of cushions. Like they have a little castle all around them of cushions supporting. And I went through all those phases. And then I went to the phase of none of that's helping. I'm just going to meditate just straight right on the concrete. And like at Bhavana Society during a retreat, I'm just meditating right on the concrete. And people are kind of looking at me weird, like, what the heck is this person doing? But this is a multiple year process of me trying to find a way to be able to have a stable and comfortable posture. Right? You have to do that kind of investigation to see what works best for your body. And now I have a system that works. Unfortunately, it means like me having to do a few extra steps than ideal, but it works for me. And so that's what I do. So yeah, that's what I would say regarding the knees and the hips. All right. So Alicia, it's a comment, but I don't see another comment. And I assume it's a kind of a comment question or like, or you'd like some commenting from me. So I will comment. So Alicia says, I unintentionally hurt some friends and I'm struggling to let go, move on, and hope they come back. I want to fix everything, and by trying to fix, I dig my hole. So the first thing is important to recognize here that this was an unintentional act. Right? That's the first thing. You understand, you know what? I didn't mean to do it, but I did it. So you recognize, I didn't do this out of maliciousness. I didn't do this with some ulterior motive. I did it unmindfully, not really reflecting, not really understanding, not in a wise way. Right? When you reflect on this, okay, well, then the next step is, you say struggling to let go. How do you let go? Well, you try to learn from it and make sure you don't do it again. Right? In the suttas and in the Vinaya, there's a 3-step process for when you commit a transgression. So like a monastic or a lay person will come up to the Buddha and he'll say, Bhante, I've committed a transgression. And he'll explain what it was. And the Buddha says, indeed, foolish man, you have committed a transgression, but you have made amends for it in accordance with the Dhamma. Now seek future restraint. So what's the 3 steps? Acknowledge that you messed up, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Yeah, I messed up. Because our mind can come up with all kinds of justifications, especially if we feel we did it unintentionally. The mind's like, well, I mean, I didn't do it intentionally. Why are they all agitated about it? Right? Or, really it's their fault. Your mind will think of all of these justifications to try to get it out of admitting some kind of guilt. So basically owning it and acknowledging that you did it, that's the first step. Yes, I've committed this transgression. The second step is to make amends. So you think, well, how can I make amends to these people? Can I apologize? Do I pay some kind of, reparation to them? Maybe I cost them money or I took something from them I can return to them. something to that effect. And now, of course, anything when it comes to if you've harmed somebody, it's a two-way street there. Like, you can feel like you want to apologize, and you should, but you shouldn't necessarily expect that they're going to accept the apology, nor should you try to force, like, hey, I am apologizing. Why are you still acting like this? Such and such and such, right? You should understand, well, they have been hurt. I don't know, what the future is, but I know what's right. I know I should apologize and make amends. And then the rest of the ball is in their court, as we say, right? It's the rest of it is their ability, their choice to accept it and move forward, or to move separate ways. But for your own peace, for your own, being able to let go and to move forward, going through this process is very important. Right? There are people who, they realize later in life they hurt somebody. And by that point, the person that they hurt is dead, or they haven't had any contact with them in many years. They don't know where they are. And so then they think, well, how can I make amends? What can I do? People come up, have different, really good ideas. Like, people will say, write a letter and then burn it, or basically, like, go through the process of apologizing and asking for forgiveness and such, and do that a whole process so that you can move forward, so that you can forgive yourself, so that you can let go of, beating yourself over the head over it, and you can move forward. Because really what you're doing, you're causing yourself suffering right now. You have the ability to move forward and let go of it. It might take some time, but you can follow the process, right? Try to learn from it. Try to make amends as much as you can in whatever way that you can. And then let it be, and put the ball in their court, and then it'll be up to them what they decide to do, right? And you can feel better and start the process of moving forward and letting go, so that you're not, overly negative and beating yourself over the head. And practice lots of metta for yourself and compassion, because just like everybody else who's not an arahant, you're just a deluded being, right? You're what they call a patujana. Same thing as me. Same thing as, most other people. I mean, there might be an arahant watching this stream, but I don't know why they would be. So pretty much all of us watching this stream are probably patujanas, right? So we're gonna mess up. We're not awakened. We have lots of ignorance, and so we don't necessarily always know what's the right thing to do, and that's okay. We can only move forward and grow and try to do better and learn from that, develop our wisdom. Hello, Vovan. Welcome. Kala, Dew. All right. Kala has a question. Do you have any advice for practicing in isolation and or practicing as a charaka or tudang monk? So practicing being isolated is something that you should, basically dive into, like kind of putting your toe in the water to test what the temperature is. It's gradually start putting yourself and longer periods of being isolated. And you'll be able to adapt to it. I mean, in all honesty, for me, it was never that hard of a thing because I spent growing up, I spent a lot of time by myself. So being by myself is something that I've been familiar with since basically my whole life. Trying to escape my two sisters, just being by myself to play my games and make my airplane models and things like that. And then later on, hanging out in my room by myself. And, so for some people, the idea of some kind of isolation is a scary thing. At Bhavana Society, every year we have the winter retreat, and I would take the month that I had for retreat and I would go into total isolation. I'd be by myself on the other side of the monastery where nobody else is, and I would try not to talk to anybody for the whole month. And I'd just be by myself and I'd do my study and my practice, and just be isolated. And for the first week, I go through like withdrawals, because I'm used to being online all the time because I'm doing Dhamma stuff, and so then there's no online and less connection, and I go through like withdrawals. Okay, and I busy myself, but then I start to settle down, and it's like, oh, this is a nice vacation. I'm tired of dealing with all these people all the time. I like this. And then I just get into the flow, just day to day, doing my practice, doing my Pali study, doing it. And then by the end of the month, it's almost time to go back. It's like, oh, I don't want to go back. I'd rather stay. I'd rather stay here. Can I stay here? But no, you have to go back. Right? So it can be a very, very, very wonderful experience. It can also be a nightmare. And usually, like during that month where I'd be in isolation, it would be both. It would be like a zigzag. It would go from like nightmare to like heaven. Boom, 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 like this. That's how it goes. Because when you're stuck with the mind, it's not necessarily a pleasant experience when you're stuck with the mind, because all kinds of stuff will come out, all kinds of stuff can happen, and we usually are so used to distracting ourselves with other people, with TV, video games, substances, whatever, that we're not used to just being with ourselves, just kind of like hanging out with ourselves like we're our own best friend. The practice helps you do that. The practice helps you do that. If you practice the Noble Eightfold Path, you develop, the path, you follow, understand your mind, and you become like a friend to yourself. You have metta for yourself, and you say, oh, yeah, we can hang out, no problem. I don't need to chase after like being with other people all the time and things like that. So start slowly, start spending, try to do something like maybe one day a week. Do a day where, you don't talk to anybody and you just practice. Do a day with an isolation day, or maybe start with an isolation half day and build up from there. But it also should be understand that like monks are not in total isolation. Most monks are not in total isolation, like on a long-term, consistent basis. Buddhist monks are not meant to be. Buddhist monks are meant to be, for the most part, at least attached or close to some kind of a community. And to lay people who provide them with their requisites. You go in, the Buddhist monks would go into the town every day. So being able to be kind of have an equanimous mind, whether you're in the village with around a bunch of people, or by yourself in the woods. That's the goal, right? To be, doesn't matter whether you're by yourself or with others. Your mind is calm. Your mind is equanimous, not running towards likes and dislikes, fear and elation, all the worldly winds. In terms of practicing as a charaka or tudong monk, find monks who have done it and learn from them. And then also kind of don't expect that what they tell you is exactly what's going to happen, because that's pretty much what happened to me. When I attempted my charaka / tudong, most of the advice that I got from monks who did it, like, just didn't happen in mine. And that's what happens. You never know when you go out, what's going to happen. Shadow of Label says, how does one see devas? Well, you obtain the Dhamma eye. You can see devas. Divine, not Dhamma. The divine eye and the divine ear. The divine eye, you can see the devas. The divine ear, you can hear the devas. And you can do that through, if you have psychic powers, you can develop that. How you do it, don't ask me. I have no idea. Nor am I trying to. If it happens, it happens. I'd be okay being able to talk to devas, but it is what it is. All right. Welcome, Sindhu. Welcome, Sud. Hello, Chris. Welcome. Oh, had a little bit of a skip here. Hello, Sele. So Anthony has a follow-up question. Can only an arhat gain the divine ear psychic power? No. As far as I understand, this is something that can be developed separately. This is something that, as far as I understand, predates the Buddha. Right? The Buddhist teachers were able to go into all these very deep arupa attainments and all these different states and all these psychic powers. But, this does not in and of itself give you wisdom to escape samsara. It's just like somebody like Jay Collis says here, this is a side effect and not to be sought after. Right? The Buddha does not praise these things. As a matter of fact, he discourages you getting attached to them and wanting to get them, because they don't really have an effect on your becoming awakened. Look at Moggallana and Mahamoggallana and Sariputta. Sariputta is the Buddha's chief disciple in wisdom, yet he could not see devas, he could not hear devas, he had no psychic powers. Where Mahamoggallana could go to the Deva realm and with his toe make the 10,000 world systems quake. Both are awakened. And I always thought to myself, if I had to choose, I'd probably rather be the one who's the disciple of wisdom. Now, obviously, they're both arhats. They both have the same attainment. But the most important thing is wisdom, not the psychic powers. Sud has a question. Dear Bhante, how does one separate oneself from one's feelings and still practice metta? Can you give a practical example as how to practice metta despite feeling sad? So we should understand that metta, when we practice metta, it's not to build happy feelings or to suppress any other feelings. It's not about the feeling. Feelings can be a side effect of metta. But what metta is practicing to eradicate even the smallest little bit of ill will in your mind from every nook and cranny. So you can practice metta regardless of your mind state, whether you're feeling sad or depressed or anything like that. You might not, I fully understand that you can feel like, very like powerful metta going through you. I experienced that for years, not anymore. It's kind of gone away. And that's can be normal. That's what happens, right? Because it's if you get attached to the feeling and then you connect this feeling equals metta. And actually that's not good because you're attaching metta, you're attaching something, a practice, onto something that is unstable. Because when that feeling goes away, then it's like, oh, I can't even have any metta. I can't practice metta. It's just my mind is too sad. No metta. You can't practice metta for your own mind. Like, what do you do when a friend is sad? You try to be a good friend, right? You try to help them. You can do that with your mind. You say, oh, have metta for yourself. If you are in a very, there's times where I can't have metta for anybody else because I'm going through something so strong, lots of suffering, that my metta for other people is just basically minimal. And that's because I need to give lots of metta to myself. I need to focus on myself. This is what I experienced, the last couple of years, because towards the end of my stay at Bhavana Society, I was an extremely busy person, teaching and traveling and helping to run the monastery and all this kind of stuff. And I was helping other people so much, and my own practice was suffering. And I was getting into, things like that I had not really experienced for many years, like lack of meaning and depression and stuff were arising. And I just got into like very kind of, aversive mind states. And I had no room for other people in my mind. And it was because I needed so much work. I had no, my bottle, my glass was empty. I could not give anything to anybody else. So I had to work on myself. And that was what I did the last couple of years in COVID, right? Because I went from teaching one retreat at Bhavana a month and traveling to some state to teach a weekend retreat every month, to just doing one or two things online, right? So like all of this, the teaching and everything I was doing for years, that was so much. COVID, and then I didn't have to do it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take this time, work on myself. And that's when I became a nomad monk, and I would go to different places and try to learn. And I spent the Vasa in a tent in California, and being around all kinds of different monastics and to work on myself. And now I feel I have my bottle, my glass is full now, and I can have metta for other beings, and I can share the Dhamma with peace and happiness in my mind because I have found my balance again. Right? So if you're, If you're feeling sad and depressed and things like that, you can practice metta for yourself. And then you can practice, also what I would say is, don't practice metta that focuses on individual beings. Because if you practice metta that focuses on individual beings, that tends to bring up various emotions. Practice metta like Mahagata Cheto Vimutti, the exalted release of mind, where you start, you have like a certain sphere around you, and you pervade that with metta. You're like giving metta to yourself first, and then you expand that sphere out to the building, your town, your state, your country, your the earth, then the galaxy, and you expand your metta out. You're not thinking this person and that person and this. There's all beings without distinction, without categorization, without discrimination. It doesn't matter. So in that way, there's really no like emotion attached, because you're not thinking of an individual person. So I guess that's what I can say about that. Charles Lee has a funny comment, something that I joke about all the time. He was the one who asked about the posture. It says, only medical condition is I exclusively sat in a chair from age 7 to 43. Yep, like the rest of us. Like the rest of us, not born in Buddhist countries. Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. Shadow has a question. Last time I saw you on here, Bhante, you mentioned a response about emptying the energy from my heart down my left arm. I don't quite remember this, which enlightened and showed fears, but was a release. But you said don't do both at the same time as meditation. Why? I think I might need some more clarification to understand that, to make a response. I'm not quite sure I understand as to why I would say, I don't know what is this an active thing? You're emptying your energy from your heart down your left arm? I don't know. We'll move on to Salah's question. Any suffering is tamed through. Oh wait, never mind. Was this a? Oh, okay. It is a question. All right. Any suffering is tamed through meditation. The two main sufferings are physical and mental ones, both afflicting each of us. Not rejecting and accepting the physical one, it makes it bearable and no more an issue. However, the mental suffering has been said that meditating for calming the mind is only temporary, while through jhana vipassana one can uproot any mental suffering forever. Can you please tell more about this? All right. So I guess this is the best way to kind of go about this is to talk about the Sala Sutta, the simile of the arrow. I talked about this morning, I think. And so the Buddha says that when you have a physical pain, what Buddha would call dukkha dukkha, You get hit, it's like getting hit by an arrow. An irregular person, a patujana, when they get hit with the arrow of physical pain, they right after get hit with the arrow of mental suffering. But an awakened being gets hit with the arrow of physical pain and dodges the arrow of mental suffering because they don't suffer. They have become awakened. They have cleansed the mind and abandoned any conditions that would cause them to suffer. And so how you do that is by developing the Noble Eightfold Path. And part of that you have here, while through jhana and vipassana, one can uproot the mental sufferings forever. Well, that there you're talking about the seventh and the eighth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. Samma sati, right mindfulness. Samma samadhi, right samadhi. Right, which is satipatthana and jhana. Yes, these are two main practices, right? Practicing satipatthana, which also includes anapanasati, right? To develop the joint mind states of samatha, which is a mind that is calm and tranquil and resting still on your object, immersed in the object. And vipassana, which is a mind state that sees things as they are, sees very deeply. And by combining these two, you're able to see the characteristics of existence. You're able to see how things are, and thereby destroy your ignorance, destroy your defilements, and replace that with wisdom, insight, and liberation. Shadow of Label says, are you a higher rank than Bhante Sudaso at Empty Cloud? No. Bhante Sudaso actually was a monk at Bhavana Society for a couple years already by the time I went to Bhavana. And he was there at both my ordinations. He was the monk who shaved my head when I became a samanera, when I did the pabbaja. If you go on my Facebook, you can see pictures of my ordination. Bhante Sudaso shaving my head. He gave me a little mohawk before he finished it. But so Bhante Sudaso is somebody who has been around since the beginning of me becoming a monastic. So he has now coming up on 11 years as a monk, and I'm coming up or 12 years as a monk. This will be his 12th vasa, I think, and this will be my 6th. So he has 6 years seniority to me. Alicia has a response to the question. I have apologized profusely and I'm not getting forgiveness. I have made amends, but the forgiveness on their part is accepted. Wait, so they've forgiven you, but you're not forgiving yourself? Is that what you mean here? You're not getting forgiveness from you? Because you're saying, but the forgiveness on their part is accepted. Gita has a question. Bhante, can you explain your understanding of wrong practices, rites, and rituals, Silabhata Paramasa? Some venerables say it's extreme ascetic practices. So Silabhata Paramasa is something to understand. This is one of those things. There's many things about the Buddhist path that you understand better if you understand the context and the culture of the Buddhist time. So at the time of the Buddha, there were ascetics who believed that if I bathed 3 times a day, then I would eventually cleanse my mind and I would become awakened. Or if you can still go to India today and you see the people, they have their hand up and they just leave their hand up for years until they're like, they've had their hand up now, it's just atrophied. right? They do all these kind of activities. And so what the Buddha is saying here is that when you abandon the fetter of Sila Bhatta Paramasa, you understand that rites and rituals in and of themselves will not bring you to awakening. So you're not going to do oblations to the fire, and that will bring you awakening. You're not going to do some kind of ritual. You're not going to sleep on a bed of nails, and that brings you awakening. You're not going to, eat 1 grain of rice a day, and that brings you to awakening. That's the important thing, because this is not saying that rites and rituals are useless and stupid. Because we have rites and rituals all day, every day. When you wake up and have your coffee every morning, what do you think that is? It's a ritual. When Buddhists come into a room and they see a Buddha statue and they bow, what do you think that is? It's a ritual. But if you have right understanding, you don't come and bow to the Buddha thinking, I just keep bowing to the Buddha my whole life. Eventually, that in and of itself I will become awakened from. No, that would be wrong view. But people can bow to the Buddha to recollect the qualities, to build their faith, to build humility, these kind of things, right? So they still have a use. You just are not under any delusion that if I just do some kind of ritual, if I know my ritual is every day at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I do 10 jumping jacks. And then over the years, if I do enough jumping jacks, that I will become awakened. Right? No, that's not how it works. That's wrong. So that's what this means. Rites and rituals have a use and a purpose. And unfortunately, the older they get, the people forget the actual use and purpose of those rites and rituals. And then you kind of like somebody like a Westerner comes and says, why are we bowing? I don't really get anything out of it. Like, why are we doing this? What's the purpose of this? Right? And then you like have a hard time explaining why. Because, well, it's just something I've done my whole life. I was just, so it's important that the rites and rituals you do, you have a full understanding of why you're doing them. Like, for instance, I love to pay respects to another monastic. Like, I started out just like most Westerners, like, why are we bowing? What's this bowing thing? Right? But then, like, when I became a monk, and as I was paying respects to monastics, I just started to feel really good, and it felt very humble and very nice. It's just a very nice thing to do, to pay respects. And so, like at Bhavana, I'm the junior monk, and anytime there's a senior monk that comes in, I go down and I bow, and like, obviously, I'm looking at all the other monks. It's like, if you did that to every monk that you met first, every time, like, you'd be doing it all day sometimes. So most, monks, as they get more senior, it becomes a bit more practical. But it's just something that I enjoyed to do, just to, and also to develop and build my own humility of, paying respects to somebody who's senior than me. That's a good thing. And so because I understand the benefits, because I understand the reason, and I do it, then it's actually beneficial to my path. But I'm under no delusion that if I just keep bowing to senior monastics, somehow their wisdom just gets infused in me and then I become awakened. No, that's not how it works. All right, next question from Sean. Hey, Bhante, what is a good way to work on Sila? I think what is missing in my practice is work on Sila. Often what distracts me are things I've said or done in the past. Exactly. This is why the Buddha in the gradual practice has Dana and Sila in the beginning. Right? This is the Buddha says very clearly that actually one of the main other than just the fact that you want to cause less harm to yourself and others, the main reason to practice Sila is so that your meditation is more smooth, so that you have less hindrances in your meditation, that you can go have a more peaceful, a deep meditation to be able to see things as they are. So yes, Sila is very, very, very important. So what I would say is the very basic Sila is the 5 precepts. Right? If you don't follow the 5 precepts, try following them. And if you really, try to implement them into your life. And if there's one or two that you just really have a hard time with, I don't know if I can follow this, then it's okay. Just do 3 precepts or 4 precepts. It's better than none. Any Sila is better than none. And then as you practice your Sila, and as you become skillful at Sila, and as you become skillful at Bhavana, cultivation of the mind, then you'll want to act even. It becomes like a positive feedback loop. The more Sila, the better your meditation. The deeper your wisdom, the better your Sila, and you're increasing both your Sila and your Bhavana at the same time. All of it is being raised because you're doing both. So start with the 5 precepts. Start to try to implement doing the best that you can, working with living by the 5 precepts in your day-to-day life. That's the basic start. And you're going to have to practice and try different things and implement and observe how your mind reacts to being in a situation, and then recognizing, I should follow a precept. But these precepts is kind of like, that doesn't make it easy to follow these precepts. And your mind might want to go, why do I follow these things? These are silly. You reflect, well, it's because I feel it's missing from my practice and it's not benefiting my meditation practice. So start with the 5 precepts, and then as you develop living by virtuous principles and you live life and you practice in various situations, you say, let me try this. I'm in this situation. I think this is how I should act. And then sometimes it's, I acted well in this situation, or no, I didn't act well in this situation. Let me try to act a different way. Let me try to act better. Start with the 5 precepts. Jay Kala has a follow-up question again from the Charaka Tudangsta. What kind of things were you expecting to happen that didn't, based on other monks who had done Charaka? People to be at least a little interested in who you are, what you're doing, enough to kind of be like, well, who are you? Why are you this weirdo who's hanging out? Right? And actually, that didn't happen to me at all. Even when I was like finding like strip malls or different places where I kind of stood out there with my bowl, nobody approached me at all. People just went about their day. And I didn't do it. It's a little bit easier if you do it like in a city or like in an urban situation. Mine was like more like a rural suburban situation, so the volume of people was a lot less than if I just was like right here in like West Orange and I went down to, what's it called, the central area of West Orange. There would be way more people, right? And so maybe it would be a little bit easier. But no, it didn't. Like, that's one example of things that didn't work out. Because it's very common. The monks will have an experience just like people will think maybe even like you're like a beggar, and they'll want to put money in your bowl, and you say, I'm sorry, I'm a Buddhist monk, I can't accept money. And they're like, well, what you accept? I was like, oh, I'm doing this is what monks do, is they rely on the generosity of others, and this is what monks do since ancient times to have food. People generously put food in the bowl. And then, monks will say, people are like, oh, okay. And they'll go and they'll get food and they'll put it in the bowl, right? You'll have these kind of experiences. I've also heard from multiple monastics since then that it's a lot harder if you're only one monk. People apparently feel more, and I understand this because they think, well, who's this one lone weirdo? But if you're like 2 or 3 monastics together, then people feel a bit more comfortable approaching you. I've been told this by multiple monastics, and it makes sense to me. But it was something that I like doing, especially in America, because I want to do it. Like my sister, basically said, who's from North Jersey. She's my youngest sister, lives only like 20 miles from this monastery. I'm originally from New Jersey, for those who don't know, and I did it where I was born. In Ocean County, which is there's very, very little Buddhists in Ocean County, if any. I was the only one I knew. But so my sister says, well, why don't you do it up here? There's like a huge Sri Lankan community, like right near where I live. And I said, well, what's the point of that? It would be too easy then. Right? Like, if, I wanted to kind of have the experience of, for the night, well, okay, there's a patch of woods, just go in the woods and that's where you sleep for the night. And that's what I did. That's what I attempted. A little hard to do that in North Jersey because there's really no places where you can kind of just like, I'm going to sleep here. And then, people are going to say, well, what are you doing here? This is private property or such and such, so. All right. Hello, Tauk. Shadow says, I don't want psychic powers. Oof. Imagine hearing what people think. Yeah, I used to kind of be afraid of being around people who might be able to hear what I think. But then I realized, like, okay, I've been doing this for 17 years. I understand my mind pretty well. And so because of that, I understand the mind of others pretty well. And if I got to the point where I was able to read somebody's mind, what would surprise me? What would surprise me? I've already seen, like, in my own mind, people won't admit these things, but I've already seen all kinds of really horrible things arise in my mind. And so if I read somebody else's mind and I see something really horrible, is that going to surprise me? No. Right? So more likely, this is what I feel like, more likely if somebody's reading my mind, they're like, oh, poor Jayasara, I have lots of compassion for this foolish person. Right? Like they're just not awakened yet. It's okay. This is, but they're trying. They're honestly and sincerely trying. So, so why not? So if I'm able to read somebody's mind, it's okay. No problem. Won't bother. Nothing surprising there. Upasika Metika says, Bante J, will you stay as a resident monastic at Empty Cloud for the foreseeable future? If not, would you share your plans with us? No, I'm not going to be like staying here for the foreseeable future. Right now, I'm a nomad, meaning that I'm not really attached to any one place. And that is for some reasons beyond my control and also reasons within my control. I have plans to eventually, as I become, like a senior, like Bhante Sudaso, to like work on starting my own place, hopefully in Colorado, and doing that. But for the next couple of years, my goal is to be free. Like my first 5 years, my years at Bhavana were very, very lots of responsibility, lots of and now that I'm free, I'm not really inclined to put a lot of responsibility and be attached to any one place for now. Now that I'm free, if somebody says, "Hey, Bhante, I just the other day, somebody on Facebook, they're like, Bhante, can you come to Arkansas and teach for the weekend?" I'm like, "Sure, let's set it up, no problem." Or somebody says, "Bhante, come here for the Vasa." I was like, okay. So like I have the ability to be free to say, I can take, whatever opportunity arises, I can accept it. I can take it, and I think that's very, very, that's more valuable to me right now than most anything else. So that I can, it's in the works, but hopefully, what I do right after, at the end of June is go to Temple Forest Monastery and stay there for a week and learn from the Ajahns and, be with the monks there, right? So I can learn and develop myself, and so like that's the next thing. And then, what I do for Vasa, I don't know. There's a possibility I might be here for Vasa. So that means I would be here from like July to October. There's also a possibility I might be somewhere else. It's up in the air right now. But I'll always visit, and I'll always be part of this new system that Bhante and I are working on, where they have visiting monastics kind of take a month or two to be like the the babysitter abbot of the monastery. Yeah. So that's my plans. My plans are, I don't know yet. Chris asks, or requests really, could you explain how good practice is a gradual self-training in virtue and wholesomeness? The Noble Eightfold Path is a gradual training, not only in virtue and wholesomeness, but also development of the mind. It's all, there's a reason why the Noble Eightfold Path is a wheel with spokes, right? The wheel needs all those spokes to make it stable so that it can roll, so that it can move. So you need all of the various aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path that work together to develop the mind. And then as you practice the Noble Eightfold Path and you develop it and you build it, you come to, as Bhante Ji would say, you create the super normal, or the upper middle path, the Noble Tenfold Path. And the ninth factor becomes right knowledge, and the 10th factor becomes right liberation. So this is, the whole path is a gradual training. The Buddha says, just like the slope of the ocean gradually slopes and then there's a sudden drop, so too my practice, gradual practice gradually slopes, and then awakening. Right? So this is a gradual development, training, building skillful habits that lead the mind towards freedom. Oh, chat jumped a little bit here. So Anthony has a question. There's a text that encourages development of the Iddhipada, I think. So Iddhipada is different than Siddhi. When you think of psychic powers, as they're called siddhis. Iddhipada are faculties, powers that are developed, like faith, like mindfulness, like energy, things like that. So there's two different things. If you study the 37 wings to awakening, the 37 aspects of awakening, you'll see that the Iddhipada is there. So we are coming close to the end, so I don't have enough time to go into deep explanation of that. But yeah, this is Iddhipada is not the siddhis, two different things. Shadow has some clarification from his previous question. Energy down the left arm causes fear, but I meditate at the same time, causing stress and high-pitched tinnitus. And anxiety. Well, it depends on what you mean by meditate. It maybe you switched your object of meditation to the energy. What's going on in your left arm. And so what's going on in your left arm can become your meditation. Welcome, Malika Jayasekara from Australia. Hopefully, if all goes well, I will be in Australia in November. A trip that was supposed to happen in 2020, but we all know what happened there. Scott has a question. Bhante, I see people making suffering for themselves. It's hard to see what to do. You have to accept that there is First Noble Truth. There's suffering in the world. And when you understand that people are the owners of their actions, just like you, right? You see people making suffering for themselves. It's hard to see. Are you avoiding seeing suffering for yourself? Maybe that's even the hardest to see, right? The only person suffering that you have any control over is your own. Not even the Buddha could take away somebody else's suffering. Right? The old saying, for the Buddhas only show the way. You yourself must walk the path. You can't take on the suffering of the world. All that does is weigh you down and create your own suffering. Like the Buddha says, there are two kinds of fools. A person who does not take a responsibility that is theirs, and a person who takes on a responsibility that is not theirs. The suffering of the world is not your responsibility, because you cannot cure the suffering of the world. You can only cure the suffering in your own mind. And while you do that, you can help a lot of people along the way. You can be of great benefit to them. You're not going to be able to single-handedly cure their suffering, but you can be a good role model, a good Kalyanamitta. and you can help them on their own path. But, depending on your temperament and various psychological traits, it might be harder for some than others to recognize that, you can only do so much, and you should focus on what you can do and not become attached to what you can't do. All right, so we are over time, and I'm going to be wary of not going too far over. All right. So Shadow asked real quick, did Theravada Buddhists commune with other sects of Buddhism? Depends on what you mean by commune. Yeah, some do. And some Buddhists live in countries that are bordering other countries that have different types of Buddhism, and there's mixing and stuff like that. Quick question from Sud. Is there a downside to making metta your only practice? Yes. You won't become awakened. Right? Metta is good for helping with ill will. It also can be a good samatha practice, but then you won't have, you need to also develop satipatthana. You need to develop the mindsets of vipassana so you can see things clearly. You can see the three characteristics of existence, know things as they are, and free yourself. So metta has its place, but it's not the only thing. You have to do the whole practice. Well, we have a bunch of Australian people, don't we? So the object, the as far as I know, the goal is that I'm going to go to multiple monasteries across the country, starting in Sydney and going to Bodhinyana and hopefully the Bhikkhuni monastery that I always forget the name of, and so I should hit a bunch of different places. All right, friends. So we have come to the end. That's good enough for now. Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy, practice well, and be well. Until we meet again, may you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice. Have a good weekend.